Test, test, test. Hello, everybody. Welcome to LA2M. Today we have an intimate setting to hear a great speaker, which is really lucky. It's kind of like seeing Paul McCartney at the Ark, right? We have Marisa with a small intimate group, so enjoy this. I'm Derek Maribon, CEO of Ingenix Digital Marketing. Happy to be here. I'm up here with Stacy Collett from Dollarbill Printing, and this is LA2M. I'm just curious, is there anyone here for your very first LA2M? First timers, okay, welcome folks. We meet every Wednesday, and we meet through the end of June. We take off July and August because people need to go places, and we go up north to Michigan for a few weeks. But yeah, so we meet every Wednesday besides that. And all of our talks are video archived, so thank you, Roger, for video archiving them. They're all up on our website, so if you want to learn something, there's great stuff there. LA2M is a 501c3 nonprofit or marketing education group, and so there is no cost to attend if you want lunch. As you can see on the menus, it's $10. Lunch is pretty good. That includes your drink and a tip. You're welcome to overtip your servers, that's fine. I'm sure they appreciate that. And then to fund ourselves, we pass the hat. So we're kind of old school. We don't have any membership fees. We don't have membership. But we do have around 2,000 people in Southeast Michigan. They get our newsletter, who come to these events, and they learn something. So hopefully you'll learn something today, maybe make a good business connection, maybe meet your future spouse. You never know. You never know. Anybody looking? I'm married. I'm just saying, for you. No, I'm not trying to solicit sponsors at the meeting. Oh, my wife's not watching the live stream. But the point is, you get some value from this. So we're going to pass the hat. You can throw a few bucks in there. We'd appreciate it. And just make sure it gets all the way around the room. Also, Stacy's going to give a T-shirt. We're going to give a T-shirt to our speaker. We have an LA2M T-shirt, Marisa. Megan at Arbor bought us T-shirts, which is great. So each speaker gets a T-shirt, and then Carter takes the famous T-shirt photo, which is very valuable. You can find it later on Facebook and Twitter. All right, you got it? All right, good.
You good?
Yes.
And we also have sponsors. Our sponsor's not here this month, is he?
No.
Okay, he's not here. So our sponsor is Dexter Builders. You guys know Dexter Builders? They build great things. They do additions.
Fixed my front porch this weekend.
They just fixed Marisa's front porch. That's a testimonial. And how was the work from Dexter Builders?
The work was excellent. Their communication was great, and their follow through was awesome.
So there you go. There you go. So we all need to go and at least have one room added by Dexter Builders to prove the value of your sponsorship. It's not too much money. So call them up. They're not here today, but they sponsored. And if you want to be a sponsor, we actually we have sponsor cards. They're at the back table. So the sponsor cards are at the back table. Dollarbill printed those up for us. And there's different sponsor packages. We'd love you to sponsor for next year. I think we're all set through this year. So if you want to sponsor, talk to myself, talk to Mary Lou, and you can sponsor. We also have a LinkedIn group. Join us there. Friend us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. You can follow on the hashtag LA2M. Tyler's tweeting in the back, kind of keep the conversation going. And anything else I'm missing? Is that everything? Okay. So the format of this meeting is we have our wonderful speaker talks for approximately 30 minutes. There may be time for Q&A. So if you have questions, save them up, and Marisa can answer them for you. And then at 12:45 we do introductions, and that means we go around the room and you get to introduce yourself. So it's a good way to kind of make connections. I think a lot of people get business from this program, so depending on what you're looking for, you never know, business connections. So without further ado, our speaker today is named Marisa Smith, and she is with a company called the Whole Brain Group, which does wonderful work. They are an inbound marketing agency. They also do web design. And obviously she knows something about web accessibility. I think Marisa has many skills. I've known her professionally for years, and she's a wonderful person. I'm sure a lot of you know her as well. So let's give Marisa Smith a warm round of applause and welcome her to LA2M.
Thank you. You guys hear me okay? All right. My microphone set up here. Yep, thank you. Thanks for having me today. So I'm curious, before I get started on this topic about web accessibility and digital accessibility, I'm curious how many people are familiar with the topic at all? A couple of people, okay. And does anybody here know anybody with a visual disability or impairment or a physical disability that has issues with accessing digital content? Just curious. Good, a couple people. Okay, so it helps me understand what the level of education is here in the room. So I'm here to talk about marketing without barriers and the idea of digital accessibility. And the reason that I got interested in this topic is because a few years ago we added a client who is actually located, their development team is located here in Ann Arbor, and they're called DQ Systems, D-E-Q-U-E. And their area of expertise is helping companies make sure that their websites and digital content is accessible to people with disabilities. But they needed help with marketing, and so they hired us to build their website and help them with inbound marketing and content marketing, blogging, all of that stuff. And in the process, we obviously learned that all of their marketing had to be accessible to people with disabilities as well. And we knew zero about this, and nobody had even really thought about it. I mean, it wasn't on our radar that there was an issue here. And so in the process of becoming their marketing company, we learned a lot as a team about how to make content accessible to people with disabilities. And so over time now, as I run into people, and it's become kind of a side passion of mine, I find that a lot of people just don't think about it. And once they take a moment and understand the topic, they realize how important this is and how a small amount of effort can really make a huge difference in somebody's life. So that's a little bit of background on why this topic is interesting to me. So I am not an accessibility legal expert. I'm not necessarily even a coder of this information, but I do have background in it from executing on the marketing side and leading our development and marketing team. So this is me, and as Derek said, I own the Whole Brain Group. We're a digital inbound marketing firm. We're located now down on Eisenhower, across from Briarwood Mall. We just moved a few weeks ago, and we've got 13 employees. And like I said before, we do a lot of web design, and we do focus on helping people make their websites and digital content accessible if that's something that's important to them. So if you're tweeting, this is a great hashtag to use. So A11Y marketing. So the reason for that A11Y is because the word accessibility actually has 11 letters in between. And so in order to shorten the hashtag up, A11Y, ally is another way to pronounce that, is the shortened version of what a lot of people on Twitter use. So we're creating our own hashtag of A11Y marketing today, if you want to use that. So what is digital accessibility? Overall, the idea behind it is to make sure that your site and your digital content is accessible to people with physical, cognitive, motor disabilities so that they can interact with your content and buy from you and learn about what you do and have equal access to information. So there's a number of different types of disabilities, from visual. A lot of people, when you think about disabilities, a lot of people think about people in wheelchairs right away, but there's also people who are blind, people who have hearing impairment, people who have a stroke. They may be perfectly capable of walking, but their hands are curled and they aren't able to use a mouse, different things like that. And so when you think about what if you were sitting at a computer and you couldn't use a mouse, how would you get around? If you didn't have the fine motor control to hit the tab on the keyboard, for example. What if you couldn't see? What if you could see but you couldn't hear? Well, how would that impact your experience? And when you start to think about that, you realize that it can be very difficult if you're looking at a video but you can't hear what it says and nobody put closed captioning on it, for example, right? So if you think about all these different impairments, then there are solutions to helping people with these issues. So if you've got a visual impairment, they can use something called a screen reader, which is an assistive device that will read the text out that's on the screen or read the alt text that's on an image on the screen. People with hearing impairments, obviously most people know about closed captioning, right? Or if you provide a transcript file, if you put a podcast up on your website, for example, you may want to provide a transcript. People with cognitive impairment or autism or things like this, thoughtfully laying out your content. This is helpful to pretty much anybody using your site, but in particular people who may have issues with understanding information or perceiving it. And then you've got people, like I mentioned before, who may not be able to use a mouse. They may not have the fine motor control, but they may be able to tab on a keyboard or use some other device to move around. And if you haven't built your sites in a way that interact well or have that right tab order, it might be jumping around all over the screen, which is really frustrating and difficult for them. So the idea is, again, to put yourself in the place of people who have some of these challenges and think about ways that you can make small changes to your content and your website to make it easier for them to interact with you. So there's a couple acronyms that people use to describe this. So there's the idea of POUR, P-O-U-R, versus poor, with, bad. So perceivable, so you want to make sure that everybody has a similar experience regardless of their ability. You want to make sure that everything is operable, so meaning that they can use a keyboard or other ways to navigate around on the site, that there's nothing that's skipped if you're using an assistive device like that. That everything is understandable, that it's clear if you have alt text on an image that it actually describes what the image is. It doesn't say image underscore 9165. If you are using a screen reader, that's not helpful to you, but maybe having it say woman holding clipboard would be more helpful to somebody. And finally, make sure that it's robust. That means that it's accessible not only on a desktop device, but also on a mobile device. There are a lot of people who have trouble using a traditional keyboard, but a touch screen and an iPad that has a little bit less sensitivity to the exact place that you're hitting, large buttons, that sort of thing. If you're not making sure that your stuff is accessible with those types of devices, that can also be an issue. And finally, you also want to think about the other types of content that you have on your site, from video to PDFs, podcasts, all of these other things. It's not just about the web pages themselves, but everything else that you're asking people to interact with to find out information about you. So in a world of content marketing where there's all this education going on online before people are ready to buy from you, it's really important to think about not putting barriers up to those people. You don't want to shrink your market by excluding people. So honestly, that's why you should care about digital accessibility. Some people get jazzed about this because it's the right thing to do. They get passionate about equal access to information and just making sure that it's fair for everybody. Other people get jazzed about this because they see this number and they go, oh my gosh, there's a huge buying power of people out there who have disabilities. Why on earth would I want to exclude those people from my marketplace? So here's some numbers that you might not be aware of. There are 57 million people, this was as of, I think, a year ago when we looked these statistics up, living with a disability. That's more than the populations of New York and California combined. That's a lot of people. So think about that. Again, do you want to be excluding those people from your marketing content and from your sales process? And of those are not just people who are interacting with you on a personal basis. They may not be able to leave the house very easily. The web may be the way that they have easy access to the outside world. And so they may be using this technology actually more than your average customer would be. So again, you want to be thinking about this and making sure that those things are not a barrier to people. So there's a lot of numbers behind this, but there's about 3.2 million people with visual impairment, 3.9 million people with hearing impairment, 7.9 million people with a cognitive or mental impairment, and 9.8 million people with ambulatory impairment that could affect their ability to interact with your website and your digital content. So it's a lot of people that are affected by this. And an estimated 9 out of 10 websites are actually inaccessible to people. What that means is if they tried to use one of these assistive devices that I talked about, they would either have a non-existent experience or a very poor experience. For example, we did a test on a site recently where in order to get to the field that you wanted to get to look up information, you had to tab 65 times. How quickly would you give up on that? Right? If that was your only way of interacting with that company, you just wanted to look up a quick piece of information and you had to hit the tab key 65 times to get to that field. So again, just kind of thinking about that and wanting to make sure that you're not frustrating people. The good news is there's a lot of benefit to doing this also from an SEO perspective. So when I get into some of the details of exactly what you need to do to make your sites and your content accessible, a lot of the things that you do also have an SEO benefit. Because if you think about it, Google is like the biggest blind user on the internet, right? Google can't, well, someday when it takes over the world it will be able to, but it cannot read what an image is and translate that right now, or maybe a little bit. So putting those alt tags on that's important for SEO is also very helpful to people with disabilities who are trying to access your content. Also, just having correct page structure, adding those transcripts that we talked about, any content like that Google might have trouble indexing. Otherwise, if you provide that alternative text-based format for people and for the search engines, that's a good thing. Additionally, many accessibility principles are synonymous with usability principles. So just, again, thinking through, making sure that your text is readable and understandable, make sure it's organized properly. All these things are good. If you make it really easier for people with disabilities to access it, overall, that's also going to have a benefit for everybody who accesses your content. Another thing that sometimes inspires people to act is legal liability, unfortunately. So more and more, there are settlements and legal decisions being made because of lawsuits that have been brought forth against companies who have not made their content accessible. So in the commerce area, in retail, in insurance and health, financial, education, there's been a lot of large settlements lately where somebody who does not have access to information has sued a large corporation or a large institution. It can cost up to $30 million for that corporation to pay the settlement and then also fix all the problems, right? And if you get sued like that, you have to have a remediation plan. You have to report back to the Department of Justice that you have done X, Y, Z. So it can be a really big pain. And so a lot of people, when they start to hear about these larger corporations, start to hear about this, they think, maybe we better get ahead of this and be proactive about it instead of waiting until somebody complains. And then we have to do it when everything's on fire. Right? The other thing to be aware of, if you do business internationally, or if you want to do business internationally, that the standards in other countries are sometimes even more strict than they are here. So, for example, in Canada recently, they've enacted the Ontarians with Disabilities Act, which is the AODA, and Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. And that's actually telling people that you have to make your sites accessible by, I think it's 2015. In other areas of the world, there are other standards where, in Australia, for example, it's fairly strict. Again, I'm not a legal expert, but you want to think about where are you doing business and then make sure that you're complying with any of the standards or regulations that are in those countries as well. So we run into this a lot when people are thinking, especially in Canada, because there are a lot of companies who are doing business in Michigan and in Canada, and they need to be thinking about this. In the United States, the two key pieces of legislation you need to know about are the Rehabilitation Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act. So you may have heard of Section 508. Has anybody heard of that? For people, right? So for people who do business with the federal government, or if you are a federal agency, or if you receive federal funding, you are required to make your stuff accessible to people with disabilities. So you may hear about, I need to make my stuff Section 508 compliant. That is why. So it affects just a certain segment. In higher education institutions, for example, like University of Michigan, if you go look on their website, you'll see that they've got an accessibility policy, and I think there's even a whole department of people who are dedicated. Are you part of that department? Oh, okay, you're nodding.
No, I'm not.
Okay, who are dedicated to making sure that all of the content is accessible for classes, for admissions, for HR, all of those things. The ADA is the law that most of you have probably heard of that required people to do things like put wheelchair ramps in and have the signals that makes big noise for people to cross the street. It was originally focused on physical barriers, but more recently, the Department of Justice and other agencies have been interpreting it to also include digital content. And so that's really a key thing to remember. It doesn't expressly say digital content because it was written in like 1991. but it is being interpreted that way, and so a lot of the noise around, or scuttlebutt around accessibility has to do with some of the interpretations that are coming out. And there are some rumors about the Department of Justice actually making changes to this wording as well to expressly state that. So it's considered a public accommodation. And those are that's the inspiration behind many people finally paying attention to this and saying, we got to do something. So if you want to think about it as, if you're going to remove barriers to your physical building, why not remove barriers to your digital content as well? Especially with more and more people are interacting that way with your brand, you want to think about making sure that those barriers are not there for people. So do we care yet? Tom?
Sure.
All right. I need a hell yeah. So think about assistive technology then. So these are the different devices that I mentioned before that people may be using to use a computer to access your content. So the key thing is, it's not just a magic wand. They don't just plug this thing in and it magically works and reads everything. Your site actually has to be, and your content has to be compatible with these devices, right? So if you hook a screen reader up and you haven't provided alt text on your images, or you haven't provided the right structure or anything like that, then the screen reader is going to jump around the screen, or it might just read IMG 9125. And so if you're sitting there, you pretend, close your eyes, turn on VoiceOver on your computer, and run it on your website and see what happens. You'll find very quickly that it's typically very difficult to use if you haven't thought about it. There are a set of standards called WCAG, or the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, that the W3C organization put out a number of years ago, that really outline very specifically from a very technical developer standpoint what exactly you need to do to make your site accessible. I'm not going to talk about every one of those here because it's really geeky, but it's things like I mentioned before, making sure alt text is on your images, making sure that your navigation is keyboard accessible, making sure that you can jump around the navigation to your content directly, those types of things. Making sure that if stuff changes on the screen, with jQuery and things like that, that the site is not, or the page is not just accessible the first time you load it, but also as dynamic content is loading into the page after that. You want to be checking your accessibility in all states. So if you want to know more about what exactly to do to make your stuff accessible, study the WCAG standards. And they're available on the W3C site. So these are kind of the top 10 issues that we run into when we're helping people make their sites accessible, and that our clients tell us about when they're brought in to remediate big issues. So when somebody's getting sued and they have to run a scan on a 1,000,000-page website, imagine that when you get a report back like this and you think, oh my gosh, where do I start, right? So these are, luckily, most of the time, it's a lot of the same issues over and over and over again, and if you've built your site in the right way, you can fix it in the header file, and it'll cascade everywhere else. The tough part is, once you get it accessible, keeping it that way, right? So again, with more content management systems and stuff like this, if you have a development team that's really trained in accessibility, and they build the site and it passes all the tests, and then they hand it off to the marketing team, and the marketing team puts blog posts in, they don't add alt text to the images, they're doing all kinds of stuff, they don't close caption the videos, suddenly it goes out of compliance. So you really have to think about all these different issues. So adding alt text on images is really important. Think about infographics. How many of you put infographics on your websites or on your blogs? Right? That's one big image with a lot of information on there designed to educate people about things. Think about actually putting a transcript of what's in that infographic in the bottom of the blog post. That'll help your SEO, and it'll also help people who can't actually read the image. You can also, if you're creating a PDF, Adobe has tools that you can use to actually make that PDF accessible and embed text in the image alongside the images as well. So think about that. Keyboard accessibility, as I've mentioned a few times, if you don't have the tab order set right, or if you don't have the flyover menus and the parallax menus and all those things, you have to think about, if you try to navigate by hitting the tab key instead of using the mouse, does it jump around? Sometimes it does. Sometimes it goes from here to here to here to here. Sometimes you can't select. I don't know if you've ever tried this. You'll be able to tab down or use the arrow key, but you can't actually select one of the navigation items because it hasn't been coded correctly. So try some of these things out and yourself, and you'll start to see how frustrating it could be if you weren't able to use a mouse. This is a big one, forms and dynamic content. So if you're practicing inbound marketing or you're trying to do lead conversion and that sort of thing, if you're putting forms up and they don't have proper labels on the form fields, again, it's difficult to fill that information in if your screen reader can't tell that this field is for your first name field, or if you haven't filled in a required field and an alert comes up, if that alert doesn't interact with the screen reader, that can be a problem. So there's a lot of just little stuff like that that can really trip people up and really prevent them from being able to do what you want them to do on your site. If the primary source, the primary goal of your site is lead generation, and you can't capture leads from everybody who visits your site, that's a problem. Focus indicators, this has a lot to do with, as you're tabbing around on the screen or filling information in, it doesn't, sometimes it will put a shadow around your form field, that sort of thing. If you're indicating status with color or imagery and people can't see, that can be an issue. Color as information. Think about people who are colorblind, right? If your whole site has red and green dots next to something to show status without a word that says required, that can be an issue for people who can't see color. The other issue can be just general color contrast. So a lot of times with modern design, you'll see a gray background with slightly darker gray text. That color contrast for people who have a visual impairment, they may be able to see, but they may have issues with distinguishing between that foreground and the background color. So you would want to run your website through a contrast checker to determine whether or not that color contrast is high enough for people. I used to work with somebody at the U who really needed to have her stuff with a black background and white text. Then she could see, no problem. But when it was reversed, she really had a hard time reading. I won't go through all of these, but making sure that your sites are coded in a way that the structure makes sense, that you're not, if you were to use a screen reader, that it wouldn't read the right column first and then the left, or the footer first. And sometimes when people are coding sites to be efficient, they display things in a different order than they're actually coded. And so if a screen reader is trying to read the code behind it, it's reading it in a way where the reading order is off. So you want to think about those things. Putting labels on your data tables is important. Multimedia, I talked about a lot. Captioning, transcripts, all of those things. Skipping to content. This is the thing where I talked about 65 tabs to get to something. Let's say on the first time you visit a site, you want to know everything in the navigation item. But after that, you just want to go straight to the content when you go to the next page. If your site isn't built with a skip to content, people have to go tab, 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 home, about us, contact us, products, product A, product B, service A, service B, service C, body. Next page, home, about us, contact us, service A, service B, service. How annoying would that be? Would you give up? Right? But if there's a piece of code that said skip to content, and you could just click on that and skip right to the body, how much time that would save somebody who is trying to interact with your site. And finally, I mentioned downloadable PDFs too. If you're doing content marketing and you're telling people, hey, download our ebook or download our checklist or our infographic, making sure that that downloadable content is also accessible is important. So again, consider the accessibility of all your digital content. Also think about mobile applications. If you're a bank, for example, or you're a retail establishment and you decide to develop a mobile app, and that mobile app is the primary way that people interact with you, to make a deposit or to access their information about their checking account, or to request service from you, schedule a home visit, that kind of thing, and they can't use that mobile device with assistive technology, voiceover, that's a problem. You're putting up a barrier to them actually using your services. Again, thinking about email content too, right? If you're doing email blasts, run those emails through a color blindness checker, a color contrast checker, an accessibility checker, and make sure that you haven't introduced problems for people who are checking or interacting with you via email. And finally, this is really important, third-party tools. Lots of people get in trouble and get sued over the third-party tools that they've asked or required their customers to use. So there have been lawsuits against universities who have required their students to use an app like, Blackboard. That's not a specific one, like a Blackboard or Google Apps or something like that. And that tool is inaccessible. The organization can be called on the carpet for that. So think about that. What if students or if seniors or people like that are a target market of yours and you're telling them in order to interact with us you have to use these tools, you're going to want to make sure that your tools are accessible too. This is a big issue in HR and jobs too. Monster.com recently got in trouble for accessibility and some other HR-based tools where you're saying in order to be employed here you need to use this e-learning module, for example, and if that e-learning module is not accessible and they can't take their training, that's discriminatory, right? So think about those third-party tools. It's not just your website, it's not just your digital content, it's all of your other tools that you're asking your employees and your staff and your customers and prospects to interact with. Here's another idea. Consider accessibility when building your buyer personas. When you're thinking about those demographic information, age, income bracket, that sort of thing, have you ever thought about putting a persona together of somebody who's in a wheelchair or somebody who's blind or somebody who's had a stroke? Right? Think about that and think about, okay, because a lot of people are building these personas now and they're thinking, okay, if I'm Bob, the marketing director at XYZ and I want to interact with my site, are my questions being answered? Am I able to access the information that I need to make a decision to buy from you? What about Fred, who's had a stroke and isn't able to use a mouse, but he's still perfectly capable of buying from you? So think about those things when you're developing your personas as well. Here's another important one a lot of people don't think about. When you're developing a style guide for a customer or when you're developing a logo, think about the color contrast issue. So we developed a bunch of marketing material recently for Comfort Care, who is a home health care company. They provide in-home care to people who are disabled or people who are aging in place, that sort of thing. And we made sure that when we developed that style guide that we had the right color contrast between the foreground and the background text, background and the foreground text, and the logo, making sure that that had the right contrast, making sure that when you choose the font that it's got enough space between it, because some fonts, this one is hard to see of course because of the projector, but some fonts are very close together, and so for people who have visual impairment, it can be really hard to distinguish the difference with ligatures and that sort of thing. So keep that in mind if the company that you're developing a brand for is, if their target market could include a lot of people in this demographic, you may want to consider that as well. So the biggest myths, there are a lot of myths around accessibility, but a lot of people think that if they're going to make their site accessible, that their site has to be ugly. That it has to be white with black text and no images whatsoever, that there can't be any interactive content, that they have to diminish functionality or the experience for sighted users in order to make it accessible for people who are visually impaired, for example, or that it's impossible to achieve, it's going to be super expensive, or that it's a lot of work to help a few people, right? Those are a lot of the objections that I hear when I talk about this. I think the key thing we do is we show them a site like this, which is 100% accessible and passes all the accessibility scans. This is a beautiful site. It's not ugly, I hope. I don't think it's ugly, right? It's not white with, black text and no imagery or anything like that. It is very attractive. There is jQuery stuff going on. There's flyover menus. There's all kinds of stuff. There's landing pages. We use HubSpot. We do all kinds of full-service marketing, but we do the extra 20% to make sure that it's accessible as well. Now, the first time we did it, it was more than 20% because you have to learn. There's a pretty steep learning curve here sometimes, depending on how complicated you're trying to be or how compliant you're trying to be. There's definitely degrees of compliance here. But after after you get used to it, it's just like anything else. It's just like, you know, applying a style sheet or whatever. It's not super complicated stuff that you have to learn here. It's just best practices and being educated and thinking about it, because it's usually a lot harder to go back and fix something than it is to design it the right way the first time. So, just to recap, you need to have good development tools to make your site accessible, and I'll share some of those with you as well. You need to educate. You have to have resources. You have to have buy-in. I should add that to the list too, right? There can be one person in the development team who thinks this is important, but unless they can convince the people at the top that this is a good investment to make, it can sometimes be difficult to get people to think this through and to plan for this. So, you know, if you are using a third-party tool like a Blackboard or something like that, you want to make sure that it's accessible, or if it's not, that they're willing to work with you to make it accessible if that's something that's important to you. There are a lot of people who haven't thought about this, but once you educate them, they say, oh, sure, we're willing to do that because it's going to help all of our customers. So just making sure you have that conversation and you think about these things when you're assessing your partnerships as well. So the main thing to remember, it's not a one-person show. You do need to engage multiple people in your organization, from the development team, to the marketing team, to the executive team, and your partners. Oops, sorry, I built this in wrong. So there are 3 or 4 tools here that I've listed. The first one is called FireEyes, and it's a really interesting tool. It is from our client, DQ Systems. It's a Firefox add-on, which if you're developing a site, it basically opens up that little window at the bottom and tells you what's wrong with your page from an accessibility standpoint, and will guide you through what you need to do to fix it. The cool thing about it is it doesn't just load it on the first time your page loads. If you do have interactive content, like a jQuery thing, or you fill in a form and it then shows a message, it will check it as it on the fly is changing. So if you're a developer, looking at a tool like that can be really helpful. There's also a tool called the Wave browser toolbar, which is up there too. And that, I believe, is also a Firefox plugin, where you can click the button and it'll scan any site that you've got loaded in your browser, and it'll bring up these little red, yellow flags on your site with information. You can click on it and see what the violation is. And frequently, like I mentioned, it's alt text, it's it's simple stuff that you could go into the code and pretty quickly change. And again, if you can get your site to like 80% compliance, and you state to people, hey, we're making an effort here, and please let us know if you encounter a problem, we're willing to work with you to fix it, that goes a long way with this community. So consider looking at other people's accessibility statements and looking at what people are doing and adopting language like that on your site and saying, look, we may not be perfect, but we're making an effort here, and if you have a problem, contact us and we'll do our best to resolve it for you. There's a color contrast checker I provided here as well. And you can run your site through it. You can put different color combinations in there and see which one has a higher contrast ratio. So if you're developing a style or website design, this is a good thing to use. And finally, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, the WCAG standards. That's a really good overview. It's a little technical, I'll tell you, but if you're a technical person, you can read through that, and really, it just gets your brain going on, gosh, I never even thought about that. That's really interesting. So part of it is just thinking through, like, what's the priority here, right? How far are we going to take this? And you don't have to do it all at once. You can sometimes just do baby steps and say, look, phase 1, we're going to make an effort to do this, and phase 2, we're going to work on this, and before you know it, you've made everything accessible. So you want to think of an audit, fix, sustain methodology. The first thing is to decide if you're going to make it a priority at all. Then you want to understand the legislation that may apply to your business and litigation, right? Look at, if there's other organizations like yours that have recently been called on the carpet for this stuff, you may be next. You may be more likely to be targeted. So a lot of nonprofits, I think it was the American Heart Association not too long ago, had an issue with this as well. So nonprofits, education, retail, finance, any of those kind of high-profile industries. Determine the level of accessibility you'll conform to. There are different kind of AA, AAA standards that you can decide which level. And then really start to begin to create a culture of accessibility. Educate people about it, help people understand what it is, why it's important, because without that buy-in, it is going to be difficult to get people to do this extra work at the beginning. But I swear, once you get people to do it and they see the benefit and they understand why it's important, it really does, the amount of work that's required really does decrease. Review your site designs and templates. Again, a lot of this stuff goes back to the original templates, and if you can fix the template, it fixes it in like all 100 pages on your site, right? It's not always about going through every individual site or piece of content. Think about all the other digital content, and then once you know what's wrong, then work to create a plan to fix it in a prioritized way. You don't have to fix it all at once. And then finally, this is the key thing, I mentioned this before, I'm going to mention it again, which is to plan for sustainability and monitor ongoing. Because again, it can be perfectly accessible when you hit that launch button on your website, and within a week, some untrained intern has posted a blog post with a bunch of images that don't have alt text, and suddenly you've got accessibility violations. So you just want to make sure that anybody who's touching your site is trained in the things that they need to watch out for to maintain your accessibility. And there are tools out there to monitor. You know, on a 20-page site, you can pretty easily just, once a month go through and scan it page by page and fix your issues. But if you have a really complicated several thousand-page site, that's a bigger monster. So you may want to consider looking at automated testing and monitoring tools. DQ has one, SSB Art has one. There's 3 or 4 kind of key players in the industry who work with the larger organizations like the University of Michigan, big players like that, to monitor and suggest remediation of thousands and thousands, million-page sites. So have that plan and know what you're monitoring for. So on our website, we have a few blog posts that we wrote about a year ago to celebrate at the time it was the 23rd anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. This July, it'll be the 24th anniversary. So we have a few blog posts up there about designing for accessibility and content marketing and some other things to consider. There's a free checklist available on our website as well that you can go and get, and I'll send this deck out after this so that you have all these links. It just kind of gives you the 5 high-level things that you need to think about when designing a website to consider accessibility. I've mentioned our client DQ systems. They have a ton of content oriented towards developers who are interested in this, and they have a great blog and a lot of free checklists and ebooks. They have a monthly webinar, Accessibility 101, that you can register for that's free, that can be a really great primer on all of this as well. That's it. Anybody have questions? Sure.
Hi, if someone is going to a marketing agency to have a website built and they want it to be accessible, how much percentage-wise more expensive is it to have an accessible site developed versus a traditional site?
Excellent question. So it depends on if the agency you're hiring knows what they're doing or not, right? So if they know what they're doing and have done it before, it's probably 20-25% more, roughly. Again, it depends on the size of the site and how much of it you're going to be doing in terms of the content, right? In order to, there's a lot of variables there, right? But it's not 200%, let's just put it that way. If they don't know what they're doing, they're just not experienced with it, then there's that ramp up of understanding the tools, understanding exactly what it means. Sometimes it's a few false starts, you get stuck on there's a few things that are kind of nuanced that once you do it once, you're like, oh, that's what they meant by that, But the first couple times you do it, you can kind of stumble around a little bit. So 20-25%. Again, it's cheaper to start that way than to come back and say, hey, we just built this 300-page site, now we need to make it accessible. Don't do that. I mean, you can, but then you're basically having to rip stuff out. It's kind of like remodeling a house right after you built it. So.
I was just curious, the companies that are making these devices, looking at it from the other perspective, are they working on tweaking their products so that they can translate websites that are not currently accessible and make them accessible? Are there improvements being made on the other end of it?
Right, probably. I'm not familiar with those individual devices. I will tell you this though, that you've got the issue of sometimes you're using a site and you have to use a site that you have no control over the development environment, right? And so there is a technology, I hate to keep plugging them, that our client developed called Amaze, that basically goes in and fixes on the fly what's being rendered in the browser, even though they don't have to touch the back-end code at all. So for people who maybe have legacy systems that if you had to get in a program in COBOL to fix it, you'd want to shoot yourself, this Amaze technology might be the way to go, because you'd be able to kind of fix it on the fly in the browser versus trying to do it at the source code level, right? So there are technologies like that. And technology is always advancing, right? So I'm sure that there are things being done, but regardless, if you as a web developer don't tell that device that this is the order in which we want to display this content, this is what the intention is of this form, they can't read your mind, right? So they can do a best guess, but if you're not doing a good job of communicating that basically to these inanimate objects, it's not going to then translate through to the people who are trying to use those objects.
So once your clients are educated about accessibility, how many of them are signing up to do it?
So we build all the sites that we build, the template that we've developed, we have kind of a custom template framework that we use, has basic accessibility built in to all of our client sites. But that extra layer on top of that of making sure that all the PDFs and the videos and all that stuff, I would say probably 25 to 30% of our clients are choosing to do that at this point in time. So it's not everybody yet, but I'm working on it.
There used to be a monthly usability meeting. Is that still going on?
I don't know.
There's a group that met and talked about issues like this.
Okay, yeah. Well, I know there's a UX group somewhere in town
Yeah, maybe
that
that's
does do
it.
that, yeah.
Okay, any other questions? No?
So once you've made your website accessibility compliant, is there some type of logo or something that indicates to the consumer that, look, this is the website I should go to versus all these others?
No. There's been some discussion about this recently. I have seen people put like the W3C logo at the bottom, or the WCAG 2.0, and say like this, we have tested this site to comply with these standards, but there's not currently like an accrediting body or anything where you can say, hey, can you test our site and like, put a seal of approval. I see people doing, those accessibility statements on their site. That's what we typically do, is we'll say, look, we've made every effort to make this accessible, but yada, yada, yada. But as far as I'm aware, there isn't a seal of approval like the Better Business Bureau or anything like that. So, yeah. Not that I'm aware of. Maybe I'm wrong.
Any other questions? Okay, I think we've covered everything, and thank you, Marisa. That was really
Thank you.
very valuable.
Thank you very much.
And now it's the time during our meeting where everyone gets an opportunity to introduce themselves. So once you receive the microphone, please stand up so that everyone can hear you and see you. And this is a really great networking tool. So if you haven't had a chance to introduce yourself to everyone in the room, this is a way to make that initial contact and develop some business relationships. So we'll start right here.
Can we give her a round of applause real quick? My name is Josh Conroy. I'm a freelance digital marketing consultant. I work with a couple of clients here in town. Basically, social media, paid advertising. If you're having any troubles with your digital marketing, come up. We can have a conversation. Nice to meet all of you.
Good afternoon, Tom Gallagher. I'm a member of the Michigan Shifting Gears program, which is sponsored by the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. And Michigan Shifting Gears is for mid to late seasoned professionals looking to do a career change. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking to move into the area of sales. So if your company, or if you know of any company out there that's looking for an experienced salesperson, let me know. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Michelle Mosaleski. I'm a web project manager at the University of Michigan Health System, and have some experience with accessibility, but we're in the process of getting all our big site, compliant. Thank you.
Hey everybody, I'm Beth Simon. I am a brand strategy and communications specialist, and I just happen to be coming off contract with a firm here in Ann Arbor, so I'm looking for new opportunities for partnership or collaboration. You can find me here or on LinkedIn at /Beth A. Simon. Thanks. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Hi, my name is Ann Abrams. I'm Director of Business Development for the Ann magazine here in Ann Arbor. We're in our 4th year of publishing, a monthly glossy. If you live anywhere in Washtenaw County and you subscribe to the Sunday New York Times or the Weekend Wall Street Journal, or if you're an attorney and you get the Washtenaw Legal News, you get a copy of the Ann once a month in your newspaper. Also, if you live in 4 zip codes in Ann Arbor and you subscribe to the Ann Arbor News, you also get a copy of the Ann once a month. So if any of you are in businesses that want to reach this market, please see me.
Hi, I'm Mike Newton, and I am looking for new career opportunities. I spent the last 15 years at Ford and GM, working in social media, marketing, customer service, and product development. So anyone that needs some help, I'd love to talk to you.
Hi, I'm Tom Crawford. I run a mobile app development business called Movable Bytes. Probably the most relevant one for here at Connor's today is an app called Happy Hour Deals, available on iOS and Android. Right now, within walking distance of here, if you don't want to go back to work, there are 7 happy hours going on right now. If you think you need to wait until the end of the day and want to go out at 5, there are 65 happy hours within walking distance of here. So feel free to check it out for iOS and Android.
How long is it walk? My name is David Coleman. I am with Brand Digital. We help brands and retailers understand the pricing and presentation of their products online.
Hi, my name is Janet Wolforth, and I'm an employee of the University of Michigan in medical research. And through my 20 years of experience there, I've developed 5 devices that make, one, anesthetizing animals safer for people. Some of them make it more comfortable for the animal to be restrained, and also to make giving intravenous injections easier for people. And recently, have partnered up with the Michigan Innovation Center, and am looking to ask a group of 30 angel investors tomorrow for $150,000. So life is good, and coming to this event, I've been coming here for several years, and I've really gleaned a lot of good advice and made a lot of great connections at this meeting. I'm currently looking for a medical device attorney for a patent.
Hi everybody, I'm Stacy from Belleville, your local digital print shop. We print things fast and cost effective. Marissa, thank you, because I'm not all with it, and I just thought the devices did that. So I'm going to ask our IT guy when we get back, and it's even hit his mind. I know my friend's mom can't see, but she answers all my Facebook things. So I figured the device did it. So it's very important, especially with 52 million. Is that what you said?
57 million, yeah, and growing.
Yeah. Thank you.
My name is Jennifer Johnson, and I'm in transition now. My last job, I was a contract person at Ford in order management. So I'm not sure where I will go next. Hopefully something similar. But I'm also here because I am the secretary of the board at SOS Community Services, and we're always looking for ways to run marketing. And this was a really interesting speech because we are wanting to get donors, and so a lot of different, of course, a lot of people who have money they need to, or they want to get rid of, are retirees with maybe visual impairments, but there's also people who aren't retired that have impairments too, and can't see why they should get more programs. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tyler Rayle. I'm a senior at MSU, and I'm a digital marketing intern with Derek over at Ingenix.
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Bella. I'm a local journalist and content specialist. I'm here to collaborate with other like-minded folks, get a little more savvy on the business side. So pleased to be here.
How you doing? My name is Jordan Beecham. I'm with Dexter Builders, and we're a full-service design build company. So we do remodeling and building brand new houses.
Also our sponsor this month.
I got contractors.
Hi everyone, my name is Jamie Boyer. I'm Director of Marketing, newly Director of Marketing at AC Web Design in Depot Town. So this is my first LA2M meeting, and it was really cool. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, I'm Dolores Brower, and I'm the Marketing Director for Knock Law, which is a local employment and civil rights law firm here in Ann Arbor.
Hi, I'm Tasha Moore with More Sophia Public Relations Group, and we help our clients positively shape perception through the media. And I'm so glad I came to this because I can definitely see now where accessibility can become a public relations issue, so it's very good information to know.
I was just saying, it can be positive and negative, right? It can be negative if you don't do it, and if you do it, you can talk about that. It's a great thing to send press releases on.
My name is Randall Bilby. I'm with the University of Michigan School of Social Work. I've been kind of studying accessibility, and we've been applying it to our new web redesign. So far, we're doing really good. So if you have specific questions, I am available to try to work through them as far as from the actual implementation side.
Hi, my name is Robert Moreau. I'm the webmaster at the School of Social Work. Yeah, we do our best.
I'm Roger Rayle. I'm a venture catalyst and help with a lot of the networking groups here in town. And Tom, I just got to say, it's important that if there's 65 happy hours within walking distance, it better be walking distance. Anyway, yeah, that's great. Yeah. Also tonight is our June Ann Arbor Video Interest Group meeting at Pizza House upstairs, 6:30 to 8 o'clock. We're going to have a demonstration of Oculus Rift, the 3D headset. Go to the a2vig.org to RSVP so we know how many seats to allocate. Also, Friday, my other self, I watch, as a citizen volunteer, watch out for the Paul Gelman 1,4-dioxin contamination that's making its way through town. So we'll have a table at the Green Fair Friday night, 6 to 9 p.m. to answer any questions about what's going on there and how the DEQ is destroying the Pure Michigan brand. You know, the DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality, is allowed to use the Pure Michigan brand. And my contention is that until the DEQ aligns its policies with the idea of the Pure Michigan brand, they shouldn't be allowed to use it.
Uh-oh.
We have a spill here.
Where's that announcement?
So that's a different DQ than my client DQ. Just to
Yeah, that's not.
be very clear that they're
DEQ, not DQ.
DEQ. Just two quick event announcements I forgot to mention. On the 24th of June at our new office in the Burlington building, which is on Eisenhower between, kind of right across from Briarwood there, we'll be holding our third, I think, Ann Arbor HubSpot user group. So for anybody who's interested in learning about inbound marketing or how to use a marketing automation tool called HubSpot, You don't have to be a user to attend the group. It's a good networking opportunity as well. I believe it is at 5 o'clock in our office. You can look on our website and see that. And also on the 27th, which is Friday morning at 9:30, we run a monthly Donuts and Inbound Marketing 101 session too that teaches kind of the basic principles of content marketing, blogging, landing page, lead generation, and conversion if you're interested in that. So come see me if you want more details. Thanks.
And I'm Mary Lou. I'm with LA2M. I'm also a freelance online content writer. So if you're interested in making a suggestion about a speaker that we could have for next year, I'd be happy to talk to you about that. If you'd like to talk to me about online content, I'd also be happy to talk to you along those lines as well. Next week, our speaker is Sola Abayan. She is the principal of BTO Solutions. Has a great resume. Please look at our website to learn more about her. Her presentation will be the 3 Ps of social media marketing. She is a noted speaker, and it'll be a great presentation. So if you're at all interested in social media marketing, please come back for that, and we'll be happy to see you again. So thanks for coming out. Thanks to Marisa. That was very informative and very valuable. And have a great day. Thanks.